Hey, everybody. I'm just laughing because that makes me laugh every single time. Hey, thanks for being here with us tonight. We have Alex Winchell from Tank Tested. Super excited. We've been having a great conversation already. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. Um, I just want to give a quick little spiel here first, Alex, and let everybody know in case we get some new people coming in. Um, so the format here is Alex and I are going to have a conversation. We're not going to be looking at the chat at all for like the first half hour or so. It's just going to be us talking back and forth, asking each other questions. After that, we will open it up and let people from the chat ask questions of Alex too. So if you've got questions or whatever, hold it to the second half. Appreciate everybody being here. We won't go through and say hi's obviously to everybody. But again, if you've got questions, do the @Rico stand, but hold them for the second half. Hi, Alex.
Hi there. So I'm going to do the least professional thing in the world, and I'm going to tell you I need to turn off my AC because it's polluting my audio. So okay. I'll be back in 10 seconds.
No problem. So Alex and I have already been talking, and Alex he's a professional, and I don't just mean that like, he's a professional. This is what he does for a living, and he is a perfectionist. I can see it already. We've talked about different things. He's definitely a perfectionist. So that actually wasn't in any way a surprise that you would get up and turn that off. And
hopefully moments before this stream happened, I insisted that we delay for another 10 seconds so I can move my light around. So yeah, that is absolutely who I am.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get too warm in there. And that's a great segue because I have no idea where you live.
Oh yeah, so I live just outside of Washington, D.C. Okay. I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up here my whole life, and have never really left but for college. So yeah, Washington, D.C., it is actually a swamp. It's built on a swamp, so it is hot. I have a lot of work colleagues down in Florida, and our weather is very similar for 9 months out of the year. So, think Florida. Where are you in the country?
I'm actually upstate New York. We live right on Lake Ontario, like it's right there. So it's not like Florida in any way, shape, or form.
Does that mean your leaves have started to turn already?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. In fact, I think probably this weekend coming up will be the peak. If not, probably midway through next weekend. It's very close to the peak. For anybody who's a leaf peeper, now's the time to come up and look at them. Adirondacks. Have you ever heard of the Adirondack?
Yeah, of course.
We're not too far from that. It's like right on the edge of that.
Cool.
Beautiful area.
Well, this past year or so, I have gotten really, really into bonsai in addition to planted aquariums, to the point that my backyard is like 80% pots of various plants at this point. And this fall has been the first year that, because I spent so much of the summer really researching and understanding how trees grow, that I'm noticing so much more about how the trees are behaving this year. And it's amazing. It's so cool to suddenly understand a little bit more about how the natural world works and see it everywhere, because things are invisible to you until you notice them.
Yes.
Until you know to look for them, and then they're visible everywhere, and it's amazing.
Yes. I love that because I got into meteorology pretty heavy, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. And same type of thing. You start noticing different clouds, you start noticing different patterns and things, and it's exact same thing. I would tell my wife stuff, and she, she had no idea. And she was like, well, I don't know anything about that. And I'm like, well, no, this is what's going to happen. And she was impressed that, yes, that's what happened. She didn't see all those signs though, because she didn't go, look it up and learn about it. So yes, I understand.
That's exactly it. It's something that I am not a birder, but I have a lot of friends and colleagues that are scientists that are birders or study insects or anything like that. And they always joke about how when they go on walks, it takes like 5 times longer than anyone else. And it's because when you know about birds or you know about insects, at every moment there's an opportunity to see something special. That for someone that doesn't know about birds or doesn't know what bird calls sound like, it's just noise. It just disappears. But suddenly, if you can identify each random brown bird, there's magic there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and it's
the
that
power
way
of
with
understanding.
Yeah, foliage, just everything. Like we do nature hikes around here all the time, and I do stop a lot and go, "Oh, look at this," and I'm pointing out different things, and my wife is just more, interested in, getting to that scenic view or something. But I'm looking at all these little things and just absolutely love it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you've got to you've got to look at your world, and there's so much out there that if you don't, you can get so much enjoyment just walking around in your backyard if you really want to. You don't have to go any place fancy or expensive to have fun. You can go in your backyard and spend a half an hour looking at the bugs and have a great day. you know it, we
Absolutely.
we've got to do more with our natural world, I think, that
Well,
we do.
I actually have another YouTube channel that I have not made any videos for, but have like created. I've shot a dozen videos for. I haven't had time to edit them. That's called Backyard Wild. And I've
Nice.
got the YouTube channel and everything, but haven't done anything with it.
Yeah.
And the whole premise is, so for my day job, I make natural history films. And so often the films are somewhere else in the world. They're somewhere on the other side of the planet. There's some remote location where there's just a DP, a director of photography, filming stuff. And that's amazing and it's magical to bring people there. But there's nature in our own backyards. There's nature everywhere. And there's the magic of seeing how ecosystems fit together. And you can do it in your own backyard. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. But I accidentally created Tank Tested at the same time that I was working on that, and I'm a perfectionist. I don't have time to do both, but it's tough to not just dive fully into the backyard and celebrate.
I love that.
Squirrels are incredible.
Yeah,
trees and sorry, I could go off on a natural history
No, that's good.
I mean, so there's an acorn tree. There's an oak tree in my backyard right now that it has dropped just a ludicrous number of acorns. And yeah, this is an appropriate story to tell on a fish YouTube live stream, but it's dropped a ludicrous number of acorns. And the reason why it drops those is because oak trees do something where they restrict their acorn distribution for several years, and then they dump them all at the same time because there aren't enough squirrels to eat all of those nuts.
Gotcha.
And what happens is the squirrels, they have a great winter. So the squirrels in my backyard are going to have an amazing winter. They're going to reproduce like crazy. Next year, there's going to be too many squirrels because the acorns aren't going to be there next year.
Yeah.
Because the oak tree is going to restrict, and that population will drop back down. So the next time the oak tree is ready to drop a payload of acorns, there aren't enough squirrels again. It's an incredible little ecosystem that when you walk in the backyard, you're like, why are there so many acorns? It's not normally like this, is it? And it's not normally like that. It's one of the 2 to 5 years that the acorn tree is just like, the oak is just ready to go.
And is it like a very distinct, is it always 2 years or 3 years, or is it sort of randomized,
Yeah, I don't know I believe it is a normal pattern. But I don't know if it's normal based on individual oak species. And I actually don't know if the oaks are communicating with each other, because we know that trees can communicate with each other and send signals and help each other out when they're sick, or when one is dying, it distributes nutrients to the other trees. I don't know the answer of if multiple oak trees can coordinate and say, we're all going to do this at the same time, or whether or not it's kind of a random thing. And if anyone in the chat does know the answer to that, I would actually love to know. So when we get to the chat, maybe we can get a lot of acorn facts.
Nice. That would be something I haven't heard about. And there aren't that many oak trees left, so I'm a little jealous that you've got the oak trees there. Because of the disease, a lot of them are gone. There's not too many left.
Yeah. Well, my backyard, I've got what's called willow oak, and then I've got some pin oaks, and they're beautiful trees. And to bring it back to fish, to try to justify this conversation, the wonderful thing about them is that they don't have that very typical oak leaf shape. It's a much simpler form, and as a result, I can put it in my fish tanks as biomaterial for recreating the Rio Negro, for instance. And because it doesn't have that typical oak leaf shape, no one knows that it's an oak leaf.
Gotcha.
They think of it that it's some tropical leaf. So I'm very lucky with the particular oaks that I have in my backyard.
Gotcha. Let's go all the way back. That was awesome. I love that. That was great. you said you've lived around Washington your entire life. Are you not too far from Baltimore too? Is that pretty far
I'm
still?
south of Washington D.C. by
Okay.
about a quarter of a mile.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, yes. So when I was a kid, um, my parents entertained me every birthday where they would ask me what I wanted to do, and every single birthday I would insist on going to the Baltimore Aquarium. So yes, I've been to Baltimore many times, but almost exclusively to see the Baltimore Aquarium. Why do you ask?
Just because I know for a fact that there's a lot of fish fan people that live in Baltimore.
Oh,
I know that I'm not seeing them right now, and I said I wasn't going to look at the chat, but I know that there's quite a few, and so I was just curious. Just I don't know. It's sort of neat when you find out that somebody that we've talked to lives not too far away from you. You know.
yeah, no, and I mean Baltimore is it's less than an hour away from me. Just south of Baltimore, between DC and Baltimore, is a city or town called Laurel, Maryland, and Laurel, Maryland is I believe it is now the second most southern city in the country that has a curling arena. And for about
That's interesting.
18 months, I did curling because
Wow.
I love curling. I think it's the coolest sport.
How did you get there? How
For,
did?
well, first, for anyone that doesn't know what curling is,
Yeah.
if you've seen the Winter Olympics, it's the one where there's a broom and
Yeah.
people are rolling a stone. It's a very strange sport, but essentially you're trying to get your colored stones closest to the center target. And you're using these sweeping brooms to melt the very top layer of the ice. And what that allows the stone to do, you put a little bit of a curl on it. That's why it's called curling. You put a little bit of a curl on it. You melt that top surface of the ice, and that allows the stone to glide over it. But when you stop sweeping, that surface level is not melted anymore as the stone is sweeping across some fresh ice. And that causes that spinning stone to grab and curl. So you're able to sneak a stone in based on which direction you curl the stone
Gotcha.
and when and how hard you sweep. But the reason I got into it was, this was around close to my 30th birthday, nearly. And it was my brief moment of, well, I'm definitely not going to go to the Olympics for any sport, but I've seen the U.S. curling team and they're in their 40s. So maybe I could be really good at curling just by mistake. I could just
Yeah.
accidentally be a whiz at it and I could go to the Olympics for curling.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at curling. And as it turns out, it's a very hard sport.
Yeah.
But because Laurel, Maryland has the second southernmost curling arena in the country, the southernmost being in Las Vegas, I was able to, drive an hour a day every other day to practice curling. And that long drive is why I no longer do it. It's not that I don't love it. It's that I'm just a little bit too far away to have the justification because
Yeah.
a game of curling is 3 hours. So an hour each way plus 3 hours of curling, that's a 5-hour night. 3 times a week, that's rough.
I wonder how many Canadians we have in here because we're making them feel comfortable with the curling talk. I do see some Australians. Oh, I know there's one Canadian in here. I saw Chris Biggs earlier. Mr. Biggs is in here, so
Yeah.
I saw him somewhere. Anyways, excuse me. Um, so we know that you are. What's your title? What's your title exactly? A documentary filmmaker? Or
Yeah,
what?
it depends. I would say, so my profession is I'm a documentary producer and editor. But if I were to talk to people and describe what I do, I say I'm a natural history filmmaker. Natural history being, all the beautiful animal stories. I mainly focus on animals, but honestly, plants and fungus are just as cool. They're just a lot harder to make into a show that will get greenlit. Greenlit means our network will pay for it to be made. And it's much harder to say, here, plants. Exciting, right? They just sit there. Yeah. So animals mainly.
And you obviously you said that you always wanted to go to the aquarium as a young kid or child. So you've always been into nature, then, right? Did what made you fall into that specific type of job?
I mean, I always wanted to do fish stuff. I kept fish when I was 4 or 5 years old. Kept it throughout all of high school. The job that I really wanted to get when I was, in middle school, high school, was to work for MABARI, the Monterey Bay Research Aquarium and Research Institute, which does the deep dives off the coast of California, and also the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is one of the most amazing aquariums in the world. And then I went to college and realized that I really like the science communication, and I don't so much like the 3 years of work to get that one little bit of information that adds to the global lexicon of information. So I very quickly pivoted to science communication rather than doing the actual research. But like, to bring it full circle, a year and a half ago, I got to work with one of the head engineers at MABARI for like 6 months. I built a touring stage show that she does, that, she tours for National Geographic and talks for about an hour and a half to venues all around the country about her work. And like, what an awesome, like, oh, I got to do it. I did not get to go down on a submersible. That is still my absolute like top of life goal, is I want to go to the bottom of the ocean. So if anyone has a hookup to go to the bottom of the ocean, I am available at any time.
Real quick, I see a lot of questions in the chat, and I just want to remind people, for the whole first half, Alex and I are just going to talk. Please save your questions for the second half. But when we do get to those questions, make sure you do the @Rico stand so they really pop out at me. And excuse me, and I apologize for not getting to those questions now, but it just interrupts the flow too much. So,
and I can't see them at all, so
there we go.
I can't respond to them. I can't.
So he's not being rude. He just doesn't see them. So
yeah.
So you fell into the National Geographic role too, then, and you've worked with them for how long now?
I've worked with National Geographic or for a company that's primary client is Nat Geo for a decade. But I just want to be very clear. I do not represent them in this capacity in any way.
Gotcha.
I am a private citizen, and nothing that I say has anything to do with Nat Geo. Because yes, that's very clear. I'm not here as my job.
Yes.
But I got into the world of natural history because I was really, really privileged. My parents were here in DC, and National Geographic's headquarters is in DC, and I knew I wanted to work for them. But because my parents live here, I was able to live in their basement, rent-free for like a year and a half while I kept poking at ways to get into the building.
Gotcha.
And that's really what it comes down to, is my career is entirely based on the fact that my parents happened to live in the same city as National Geographic. There's a million people that are just as qualified as me. I just had the privilege of being here and having my parents be able to keep me in their basement. So I always want to like not just stay humble, but also genuinely be honest about the fact that my career has been entirely based on just the luck of where I was born.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel better about the kids living in my basement. Oh, I lost my train of thought. There was something you were just saying.
Well, to bring it back to, I came in through, a weird passageway of, I did natural history. I wanted to do natural history, but how I got in was doing graphics. I built graphics for television shows pretty much for free, as a path in. And then by true miracles, never was fired, because I am a creative through and through. I am not an organized person. You will notice, if you are a subscriber to Tank Tested, I do not post videos on a schedule. I post them when they're done, and that's how I work. So sometimes there's a week between videos. Sometimes there's 7 weeks between videos. And I can tell you that my stress level goes up and up and up every week that goes by, that I missed another deadline. Yeah. But I am a creative through and through. I focus on the work, and I don't really pay attention to calendars or email. So it's a miracle that I still have a job.
Well, it's a miracle that you came up and decided to hang out with me too, because we thought you.
I mean, you got very lucky that I happened to check my email at the moment that it came in, because You could have just as easily emailed me and it would have just disappeared into my
Yeah.
inbox as like, oh, well, I didn't check my email for 3 days, so it's gone. But I'm very happy that I did happen to check it at the exact moment that you sent an
Me
email
too. Me too.
to me.
And I do, we have that in common because I feel the same way about what I'm doing here. I've been so amazingly lucky to have people like yourself and Rachel and Corey and Lisa and Whip. I could go on and on. Again, you're the 41st
It's
one.
amazing that you're including me with that group of people because those are all incredible people.
Oh no, you deserve to be there, man. I really, really enjoy your content. And when it comes to, like, I have a very good friend. I don't know if I've seen him yet in here, but Stephen P. 2003. The guy's he's a great editor, funny guy, great content. If you, I'm just going to tell you to go sub to him, Stephen P. 2003. You're going to love his content. If you're interested in fish keeping, you're going to love it. He makes music. He's got rap songs and country songs and that are all fish related. Some of them are parodies, some of them aren't, some of them are original. But he's a very good editor. That's where my point is. And when I watch your stuff, I don't edit at all. I mean, I throw my intro on the front and that's it. And whatever's there is there. And I look at your stuff and I go, what am I even doing on YouTube, man? Because I mean, granted, you do it for a living, but it shows your content is amazing. And people who haven't seen it, you really, Myrtle's dropping the links. Thank you so much, Myrtle. Tank tested right there. The shots are amazing. I mean, I can just sit and watch these videos forever because they're so beautiful. And that tank behind you, I do remember when you were putting that together, the whole thing that you did.
Well, I will tell you a story about when you say the shots are beautiful. I really appreciate that. My career, there are producers, there are editors, there are cinematographers, there are all these different roles. Yeah. And I got very, very lucky, as I said, that I get to make natural history films. That's what I get to do for a living. It's amazing. Cool. But I don't often get to go out in the field and film anything because there are people that dedicate their whole careers to making a shot of a bear look the best that it possibly can. And I can't compete with that. So the reason why the reason I started Tank Tested was I had been in the office for like 7 years and never had gotten to touch a camera professionally. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot something. What can I film? Aquariums. Now, aquariums, as it turns out, are really challenging because they're low light and they have glass that reflects everywhere and distorts everything. But that was like my entire motivation was I wanted to get practice filming. So I appreciate that you said that, it looks professional.
It does.
I will say, especially when I look back at the videos that I've made, there are so many different jobs that happen behind the scenes of making a film. And one of the important ones is a colorist. And I get to work with really talented colorists because it's not my money that's paying their salary. But I do not know how to color correct to save my life. I am terrible at color correction. And I look back at videos that I've made and I'm like, why is this video pink? What is happening? Why is everything purple? Or why is everything green to you? Yeah. And I do not know how to do it. So
it doesn't show. That's your perfectionist coming out.
I appreciate that, but that is like the last hill that I need to climb of figuring out how to make color work because I am bad at
it. I disagree, but again, you're a professional, so you are going to see those types. It's like a musician,
Yes,
professional musicians. They have a harder time, I think, appreciating some music because it's not technically perfection, and maybe they can't appreciate it as much. And I think that's sort of the same thing that's happening to you because you see this stuff at such a high level. You can't appreciate your stuff, and you really should.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we all have that though. I mean,
we do.
You do. I know we talked about this that you retired from working in IT. Of if you saw literally any part of my setup, you'd be like, "What is happening here?" It is. There's security issues at the wazoo. Nothing is where it should be. Everything is a disaster. And for me, I'm like, I am just doing the best I can over here. I'm just trying to make things work. So and any specialty, it's the same thing we talked about with birding and or with meteorology. You mentioned I have no idea what any cloud looks like. And you would probably be like, oh, it's going to rain. And I would just look like, okay, if you say so. But it's the expertise, right? Once you know just enough to be dangerous,
Yeah.
you suddenly notice everything.
Yes. Yes. I got you. And I definitely don't have that eye. So, yeah, your content to me is just incredible. It's
I'm
fantastic.
sure you do have that eye, just not in the one thing that I have the eye in. I'm sure you
Gotcha.
have that eye in a myriad of other topics.
Yeah, I don't know. Eye for detail has never been one of my strong points. I'm a big picture guy, you know. I got the ideas, but when it comes to the actual little working parts of it, a lot of times that doesn't flow very well. Um, okay, so we talked about living there. Oh, you said the only time you really left that area was to go to school.
Yeah.
Do you? Where did you go to school, if you don't mind?
Oh, I went to a little hippie college called Hampshire College, which is up in Amherst,
Oh,
Massachusetts.
yeah, okay.
It's itty bitty, teeny tiny. I think it has less than 1,000 students right now. And the wonderful thing about it is, and the reason I went there was because you could design your own major. And at the time, I wanted to do the science path, but I also knew that I could do storytelling. I was like, well, I can do both hard science and film, and I can do both of those things. And I kind of did to some degree. I took a lot of classes in botany and horticulture and that kind of thing, while also getting the closest thing to a film degree that Hampshire offered. But yeah, I mean, I would love to move back up to the Northeast, up to Western Massachusetts, probably upstate New York as well. The seasons there are beautiful. In the wintertime up in Massachusetts, I would sleep with my window open because, I can just pile blankets on and sleep with the windows open. It was great.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I don't do that here. I don't know. I guess it's because I live in a city and I'm vaguely worried about someone coming into my open window.
Yeah. I
But
do it here.
in the country, it's great.
Yeah, and we definitely are very rural. Absolutely love it here. The winters can be a little long. I mean, we do get 6 months of winter, so it gets a little long. We get a lot of snow. We
It's
get a lot of
true.
lake effect. Way
But
more
that's,
than Buffalo. Way more than you always hear about Buffalo, New York getting a lot of
yeah.
snow. We get way more than Buffalo does. They're like not even half of what we get.
But that's where hobbies come in, right? When you have 6
Yes.
months of winter, you've got to find things to do inside. And
Yep.
I'm now understanding, you mentioned before we went live that you try to read just a ludicrous number of books a year.
Yeah.
If you have 6 months of winter, that starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, there's not a lot of activities. I mean, you could still get out. There's sometimes you'd be surprised, like in the middle of February, even you get a 60-degree day out of the blue, and everything melts and it's just beautiful.
Actually, to circle back on you mentioned that you try to read a bunch. Do you read nonfiction or do you read fiction?
Yes.
Okay.
I read. I love to read. I read all kinds of stuff. I read comic books. I read. I've got George Farmer's aquascaping book right here. I've got. And right next to it, I have a Batman graphic novel by Neil Adams.
Awesome.
I like sci-fi and fantasy. I like history. I like alternate history stuff. I think that's really cool. I love alternate history things. But I've read meteorology textbooks for fun. I just love to read, and I don't do it as much as I used to. I mean, I was really used to be a lot more into it, but actually YouTube sort of took a lot of that time away. And that's my choice. It doesn't do it, that's my choice. But I'll read just about anything except, I'm not a fan of like romance novels, but pretty much I'll read paranormal. I mean, anything, you name it, I'm interested in reading it.
So that I appreciate you opening the world of what reading constitutes, because I don't read that many books. I'm an auditory learner. But as you're saying that, like, I read a lot of scientific papers, actually. That's like weirdly a comfort food because it has a very clear structure, even though there's a lot of nonsense words in them.
Yeah.
Like I can get really cool answers to things. So I do read a lot of scientific papers. I don't read a lot of books though.
Gotcha.
So,
but it still counts. It's still reading.
So in fact, today, so my partner, she sent me a thing that was going viral on Instagram of someone had caught a yellowfin tuna, and the yellowfin tuna was sitting on the boat, and it has these little teeny, what are called finlets in between its dorsal and its caudal, its tail, that are like these little yellow little flaps, and they go up and down, up and down. And the fish was, suffocating, which is very sad. But its finlets were fluctuating back and forth. And she texted me that, and she's like, "What is going on here?" And I didn't know the answer to that. So I went down a rabbit hole, found a scientific paper, and read the whole thing during my lunch break. That was just about what is the purpose of these little finlets, because most fish don't have them. And since this is FishTube, I can talk about it, and maybe people will care. Yeah. What's really cool is, so if you imagine the big tuna, they're incredibly fast. They're an apex predator, which is why we probably shouldn't be eating them. I'm going to go off on a tangent. We probably shouldn't be eating tuna because they are an apex predator. So it's not just that there's an accumulation of mercury in their body. It's also that apex predators, are way fewer of them than down the food chain. And the ocean food chain is actually way bigger and has more tiers than a terrestrial food chain. So in the same way that if we were to start eating lion, for instance, you'd say, well, we're going to eat all the lion. There aren't that many lion. Tuna are an apex predator, and there's like 7 layers below them. Between the lion, you're talking about, oh, there's the lion, there's the zebra, and then there's the grass. So it's like there's just so many more stacks. That's just a tangent. Point is, tuna are apex predators. They hunt by swimming really, really fast. And the question is, how do they do that? And do the finlets have to do with them swimming really, really fast? Are they providing propulsion? And this paper looked at it. And the paper came to the conclusion that the finlets were not providing force forward. They weren't propelling the fish in any way, even though they're constantly moving. What they are doing, though, is they're disrupting turbulent flow, which is what's happening in the water. And it's the thing that actually causes a lot of drag. You want laminar flow when you move through something, where the water just pushes past you. Yeah. And what these little finlets are doing is they're creating a turbulence that's controlled that allows the tail swoosh to be that much more effective. Gotcha. So that's the logic behind what's happening there. Is those little finlets have evolved to make the tuna that much faster.
Spoilers.
Thanks for yeah, exactly.
They're tuna spoilers. I never knew tuna.
What's really cool is that they're controlled by the limbic system. I think I'm right about this. I think they're controlled by the limbic system, which is a really strange system to be controlling that. Basically, like the glands, I don't really even understand how they're doing it, but it's not muscular that's moving them back and forth. That's at least my understanding. Don't quote me on that. The first part, understand. The second part, not so much. But thank you for indulging me in like a 5-minute rant about tuna and tuna fishing. I know that I just hijacked your channel.
No, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And that's awesome. That's because I didn't know anything. I don't really know anything about tuna, to be honest, other than and you said we shouldn't, but it's delicious.
It is. Look, I'm not arguing that it's not delicious. I'm just arguing that when you start thinking about food chains, terrestrial foods, we eat the bottom. Yeah. We should be eating lots of plants, and then if you want to eat meat, you should be eating animals that eat the plants. You don't want to eat the very, very top of the food chain because like there aren't that many of them, and that's the ocean is big, which is why we can eat tuna. But there still aren't that many tuna relative to the amount of herring that's floating around out there.
And we've already made a big dent into that too. So I'm with you.
Plus, mercury builds up in their bodies, and like I agree, tuna's delicious, but you also don't want to be the 12th thing in the chain of like, oh, I'm eating. Yeah. I literally, you can measure the amount. Sorry, I'm going off on a rant. It doesn't matter.
That's great though. You know what? We're already halfway through the stream. We're already, it went just like that. I feel like we just started talking. How are you on time? Do you need to end pretty close to the end?
My concern is battery. So I've got 72% battery on my phone. I'm good.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to bring something up that So I know that you are a bisexual male.
Hmm.
We've we've talked about stuff, and we have other we have some people in the fish fam that a good friend of mine, Lefty, had just come out last week
Yeah.
um, as a gay male, and I'm just curious if there's any like you know is there any positives or negatives that you can talk about with that as far as fishtube is concerned? Has there been any kind of pushback on that? Has there been any kind of support,
Yeah.
extra support or anything like that? And the reason we've talked about this, but I see my other good friend, Robert Tianaqua, in the chat. Now, Robert has a stutter. We interviewed Robert. He was one of my first interviews, actually. He's his good friend, and we talked about the stutter, um, and what that has done with his life and things that has changed, and positives and negatives. Um, and part of the hope there is that there was somebody else out there that maybe had a stutter. And Robert does a lot of live streaming, does a lot of videos and stuff. And they would see, okay, well, this guy has a stutter. Maybe I can do this as well. Maybe I can join the fish fam. So that's sort of the reason I'm asking and
Yeah.
bringing it up is maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't want to be themselves, but
Yeah. No.
they can
And
be.
I think that's a really it is the reason why I've been public about being what I identify as queer. And the reason why is because I think my perception, just my experience, is that people do not have a lot of reference points of what being queer looks like. They don't know what that really means, or what being bi or anything really means. And I certainly fell into that same bucket. For years, I definitely struggled with the idea of what is my sexuality, because I'm not older, but I'm old enough that I'm not Gen Z. And the idea that like there really was, you could be gay or you could be straight. There wasn't another option. There wasn't shades of gray. And that was incredibly stressful for me. It was really, really hard. And highlighting just the terminology, I think is really important, because I think there are lots of people out there, and maybe I'm projecting, that are somewhere on the spectrum between straight and gay, and maybe have inner turmoil dealing with that, of trying to figure out what does that mean. And the answer is, it doesn't really mean anything. You are who you are. Like if you're bi and you're with a woman, that doesn't make you less bi. It doesn't make you and if you're with a woman and you discover you're bi, that doesn't mean that you can't still be with your partner. There's it's who you are. And the same thing, I mean, to really overcomplicate this, if you go on my YouTube or on my Instagram profile, you'll also see that I list my gender pronouns as he, they. And I do that because I don't really strongly identify as male. It's fine. I don't have gender dysphoria about it, but I broadly just I don't have strong attachments to the idea of maleness, which I know lots of people do. Lots of people, being male is key to who they are
Mhm.
and key to how they move through the world. And that's not really how I move through the world. And that's not to say that, it's not to say anything. It doesn't impact how anyone else moves through the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't impact how I'm not going to be offended if someone refers to me one way or the other. It's fine. But for my sense of self, it's really valuable. And it's another thing of, I think that it's really important to make people as comfortable with normalizing what gender and sexuality can be, because it's not just about forcing myself and my identity on other people. It's about the idea that it's really tiring. It's really tiring to force yourself into a square hole as a round peg.
Yeah.
And you can do it. Lots of people do. But if you have the option to explore what other terms can better define you, it's really really freeing. It kind of, there's not many things that you can compare it to, but one of the things that I comes to mind when I discuss this, which is an imperfect analogy, is that one of the reasons why we have the color blue as one of the least diverse sets of colors of descriptors. You know, we have pink and we have red, but with blue we have blue and light blue. And why is that? The reason is because blue is a much more recent addition to our lexicon, our language. Whereas red was probably the first color that we ever described. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here. Bear with me. Because red was probably the first color that we described, we have a more robust set of colors that we use to describe red. And as a result, we can more precisely identify what's happening. With blue, we don't really have a very large set of common vocabulary about what blue is. And the same thing, I think, is true of sexuality and of gender. When you only have two words to describe sexuality, of gay or straight, or you only have two words to describe gender, man or woman, you're robbed of the precise nature of describing who you are in a way that feels exact. So it's not necessarily about forcing someone to accept whoever you are. It's more about being able to say, that's exactly who I am. I understand who I am. I better know myself because there's terminology that is precise. That's it.
And you being who you are, like you said before, has no effect on other people. And it shouldn't, and it doesn't. And
no,
some people want to make it that way.
Truly, it just comes down to being able to better describe yourself, because I think the most important thing, and this is just for me, for other people, maybe they have a different perspective, but for me, being able to better understand yourself is critical to being happy. You know,
Sure.
I'll take this down another really intense tangent, which is, so for many years, I had OCD. I still have OCD. But I had really, really severe OCD, to the point where I was having panic attacks for somewhere in the order of 4 to 6 hours a day. And I did that for like 5 years of my life.
Wow.
It was awful. It was miserable.
Yeah.
Understanding what OCD was the critical tipping point for me. Going to therapy is great and all that, but again, I'm a very analytical, understand the science, research thing. And what worked for me was reading the literature, reading the written for psychiatrist textbooks of understanding what this is. And that precise description allowed me to understand what was happening within my own brain and allowed me to better know myself and recognize what was happening. And that's my 2 cents. Is essentially, once you have a word to describe something, you're better able to know yourself, and that's invaluable.
I understand it. I understand it 100%. Years and years ago, I was very, very, I got very sick. Didn't know what it was. You know, they couldn't put a name on it, and we finally got a positive diagnosis, and all my anxiety and everything went away, because I was like, okay, now I know what it is, and now we have action items we can do and things we can try, and and I was accepted. I accepted what was going on and putting a name on it. Being able to label it and understanding it was huge. So I understand
exactly.
100%.
And to bring it full circle back to sexual identity and gender and all that kind of thing, for anyone that any of that resonates at all, the process isn't you announce to the world exactly who you are the second that you have a grasp of it. The process is usually that you get to know those terminologies yourself, understand who you are, and then you can start to introduce those terminologies to people around you. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Having a diagnosis doesn't mean that you run out and tell the world what your diagnosis is. It's that now you personally can be like,
yes,
okay, I now feel a level of control over my life that I didn't have before.
Exactly. 100%. You nailed it. Yep. 100%. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know some people are uncomfortable with some of this talk. I get it. But the reason I wanted to sort of mention it was, again, just like with Robert, and not that Not that your sexuality is an
No,
impairment
no,
or
they're
anything like
like
that. It's just that
these are all things that we all experience. I mean,
I,
I'm dyslexic as well. Like I've met people as adults that are dyslexic that don't know they're dyslexic. And when they discover it, like it is horrifying to them that they've lived their whole life not understanding
yeah,
why it's so hard for
yeah.
them to learn that way. Like
I'm just
everything,
worried.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I don't think any of it is inherently a disability or a problem with how your brain or your mind or how you move through the world. It's just precise language. I mean, obviously there are things that are problems, you know, diseases and that kind of thing, which are empirically bad and that you need to get treatment for. But
Yeah.
Things like dyslexia or having a stutter are not inherently problems. They're just a different way of your brain operating. And once you understand that, you can move through the world in a more productive way for yourself.
Yeah. And I'm all about inclusion and making sure that everybody is maybe not represented exactly, but everybody knows that they can just be themselves. Like I used to always say that everybody that that comes here, we have one rule: don't be a dick.
It's
That's
a
it.
good rule.
That's it. That's the entire rule. Just treat people with kindness. You know, that's it. And I want everybody to know that they are welcome here. You know, and this is someplace that you can just be yourself. You don't have to feel like you're somebody else. You know, just don't. You know, just don't be a dick. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
I think that's a really good way of moving through every situation is to try to keep in mind, like, try not to make the world or the room worse for you being there.
Yes.
Like,
Try to
that's it.
focus on the positives.
Right.
Try to bring out the positives. Try to accentuate those positives. And, you know, that's not to say you just totally ignored the negative stuff that happened. You can't. But you don't have to dwell on the negative side of things. You can dwell on the positive side of things and push that side more and try and, you know, really spend your energy in those places more.
I'll push back on that. I think it's okay to dwell on the negative, but with the goal of doing something about it. Like if something is unfair in your workplace, I think it's totally reasonable to make a fuss about that and make everyone a little bit uncomfortable to try to make it better. I think that's a totally appropriate response. Doesn't have to be someone's response, but I think it's a totally appropriate response. It's just a matter of you shouldn't make your workplace or your friend group worse just because you're a sore loser or because you know you really wanted to go to Olive Garden and instead we're going to Red Lobster or something like that.
Yeah. Pick your battles. Pick your battles, people. I feel like I had this conversation today. Okay. Anyways, that's a good time. And actually, we're at 7:20. And again, you said you're not pressed for time. You're still good. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'd like to open it up. I'm gonna, if people, now's a good time. If you've got any questions at all for Alex, make sure you do the, you know, at Rico Stand, so it really pops out. There are 63 people watching. I appreciate you know, every one of you coming in and hanging out with us. If you've got any questions, now's the time. And I'm going to start right here at 7:20 with Ryan from Natural Aquariums. He says, Alex inspired me to check and see if there's a curling link around me. Curling link, is that what it's called?
Gosh, I don't know I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know if it's a typo or not, and see if there's a curling link. And I'm thinking that it's a rink. But anyway,
it might be a rink. I've actually debated that amongst myself. Like, I should really look up what a curling facility is called.
Yeah,
and I don't know the answer.
That's funny. There's indeed a club near me that offers lessons. Do you have any specific advice for somebody getting into the sport? And he does say rink. Yeah.
Actually. So most clubs, because curling is such a niche sport, right? When you show up, it's kind of like going to an aquarium club, which everyone should see if they have a local aquarium club. People are just excited to share their hobby with you because it's not like baseball or football where everyone knows it. Curling is like a thing where you're like, a new person, we can lure them in.
Yeah.
So generally what happens in a curling club is they have those open times to train where they'll teach you the basics. And what that looks like is They'll teach you how to walk on the ice because, well, I'm just going to go down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good.
Curling ice is different than ice skating ice. Curling ice, before the match, they've got this hose, kind of like an upside down watering can, that they sprinkle the ice with little droplets, and those droplets freeze. And then they slice off the very top of those droplets. And what that does is it means that the curling stone is skating on top of the tips of those droplets rather than the full sheet of ice.
Gotcha.
So to walk on the ice, you don't have skates or anything. What you have is you have 2 feet, one that is covered in essentially Teflon so that it slides on the ice, and one that's covered in a really grippy rubber. So one shoe flies down the ice and one shoe sticks, and that's how you control things. So one of the things that you learn is how to kind of navigate with that, and they'll give you basically booties to put over your shoes so that you can do that exact thing. Most clubs will have them available. You don't need to buy your own shoes. And then you've got your broom, and most clubs will have publicly available brooms. But that first day, usually what they're trying to get you to do is successfully throw a stone down the ice. And that's pretty much it. So it is a steep learning curve. It's something where you show up and you're like, this is gonna be easy. And it's kind of like bowling in that if you've never bowled before, expecting to throw a strike is probably optimistic. Maybe you'll get lucky and get 1.
Yeah.
But that's about it. But what's really lovely about curling, just to hard sell it, is the fact that most clubs have many leagues. They have competitive leagues, and then they've got more just like for fun leagues. And you could stay in the for fun league for a couple of years as you learn how to do it. And you'll have a team. You'll have a team of 3 other players that together, the 4 of you are a team, and you'll get to know people and get to spend time with them. And most clubs have a tradition of, after you play your game, which takes about 3 hours, it's a time commitment. It's like baseball. You then have a drink with everyone afterwards, and it's a really great way to bond with people. And for folks that are not super athletic, for either maybe they have arthritis, maybe they are older, maybe you're just out of shape. Curling is a sport.
I'm all of those. I'm all of those. You just hit the trifecta. I have all 3 of those things.
Great. Curling is a sport that you can still compete at the same level as a random 25-year-old. It just comes down to you learn the process. So it's an opportunity to bond with people. I mean, one of the cool things that I had when I was at the curling, it's nearby one of NASA's facilities. So there are quite a few people that work at NASA that I got to curl with. And those are my people to some degree. I love talking to scientists. That's the whole thing that I do. I just told you I read scientific papers for fun. It's the thing that I enjoy doing. So it's just like, this is an opportunity to meet different people that I would never meet otherwise and play a sport that is fun, but I don't have to actually be good at.
Gotcha.
So absolutely, go find a curling club.
Do they have different positions? Are all 4 of the people on the team, they're all the same? Or
so there's a captain who is the captain, and they call the stones. So basically, when you're throwing the stone, you can't see what's happening 100 feet down the ice. So the person that is the captain is at the end of the ice telling you what's going on at the other end, and where to throw your stone and how much curl to give it and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the second captain, the person that's underneath the captain that calls when the captain is throwing. But every person gets to throw 2 stones in an end. So there are 8 stones per team. And you throw them one after another. And the order that those stones are thrown, there is logic to that. Because you want someone that's really, really precise, maybe at the third place, so that they can sneak in when stones are already there. And everyone has a different job to do. So the person that's throwing those first stones Often their goal is not to score with those stones to get it closest to the button, the center of the target. Their goal is to block the button.
Yeah.
And so they pretty much throw the same basic configuration every time, but then maybe their strength really is they're able to sweep and understand the rock as it's rolling in a precise way. So yeah, there are roles, but everyone does the same thing, just at a different time, which means they need different skills.
Gotcha. I am going to read the history of curling now, because I want to know how they got to the point where they discovered cutting the tops off of those things. And
yeah, I mean, curling started in Scotland.
Of course it did. My people, just like golf.
And in fact, curling stones historically have been all mined from 2 quarries in Scotland. And like we've this is welcome to the curling podcast. The interesting thing about curling is that the fidelity of the broom and all of those specific things, you're taking a sport that's several 500 years old and advancing it further and further. And now the materials that we're able to fabricate are too good for the sport. So there are brooms that are illegal because they're too good at being able to micro melt that top layer. And it makes it too easy to play the sport. So the stones are still controlled. The stones are still from a specific set of quarries, but the brooms and the shoes and all that kind of thing are shifting. And now the leagues are actually having to regulate down because it's kind of like having a corked bat. You can make something superhuman, but is it fun anymore?
Yeah. Same with golf. And I don't even play golf, but I know for a fact that, certain clubs and stuff they've outlawed and you can't use. That is awesome. And thank you so much. I am going to go read a book about the history of curling. So
you should.
You put a whole new thing.
Report back. I doubt if I'll know more.
I doubt if I'll ever actually play the game, but I will definitely at least learn about it. Maria Z came in. Ricky would like to know, that's RB Animals and Movies. Do you have a favorite movie and or TV show?
I do have a favorite TV show. My favorite TV show is absolutely The Good Place. I adore that show.
It's a good one.
And I won't spoil anything, but the reason why I love that show is it reframed how I thought about storytelling from the perspective that it is such a kind show. It's a show that deals with religion and it's a comedy. So there's certainly like the risk that in the wrong hands, that's a very it's attacking religion. It's dunking on religion, and it's a comedy that doesn't do that while the entire thing is about morality and kindness, and it's a spectacular. It makes me want to be a more kind-hearted storyteller. So that's why I really love that show.
It's a great show. I love that show too. My wife really loves that show. I'm surprised she doesn't have a Good Place tattoo by now.
It's so good.
MedCow. He just has a comment. MedCow has a comment. Don't sell yourself short. Just because you lived in your parents' basement doesn't mean what you accomplished wasn't your fault. A lot of people would do nothing in that situation. So just some words of kindness and support from MedCow.
It's true. The opportunities are often squandered.
Let's see. So let me scroll down here. And again, people, if you would, please do the @RicoStan, because I'm just sort of skipping through. Fishroom Fever says, after 3 falls in 2 months, I think ice is the last thing I need to be on. And it's so good to see you, James. And so many awesome people. There's 73 people in here right now. I appreciate everybody being in, coming in, hanging out with us on a Tuesday. You guys are the best. The Fish fam is just awesome, and I really, really appreciate y'all. Real Madrid fan says, good morning from Kurdistan. If you weren't in the fish keeping hobby, what other hobby would you do? And that's a great question, because usually we do get into the hobbies, what other kind of hobbies people have. We just didn't seem to get to that one. So do you have any other hobbies that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that I've gotten incredibly into bonsai in the last year or so, which is, the natural extension of aquascaping. Aquascaping takes about a year and a half, it takes less than that, 6 months to make a beautiful aquascape once you know what you're doing. Bonsai takes like 30, 40 years. So, and if you really know all the shortcuts, maybe 10 years. So it's the natural extension of why don't I take something that already takes a long time and make it take 10 times as long. So bonsai is certainly the thing that resonates most with me, I think, right now in terms of hobbies.
And, I would love to just see all the stuff that you have out there. It doesn't have to be like a, formal video, but I would just love to see, all the different things. Even if you just did an Instagram shot or something, I'm dying to see it.
I should do that. The reason why I haven't is because I know how little I know, and I know that I'll be like,
oh, gotcha.
why am I documenting this as if I know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like I know enough, but I also, it's amazing that the learning curve with any hobby is just extraordinary. Where trees that I started to take from a pre-bonsai form into something that's closer and closer to something that could be called bonsai, I already am like, I made catastrophic mistakes that I can't be undone because, I cut something off a tree.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? I'm going to wait 3 years for it to repair itself.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's the process. We go through that with aquariums too. 6 months down the road, you're like, how in the world? Why did I think that those two fish could go together?
Yeah. I like this one too. Fishroom Fever just said, I might try to get sponsored by Life Alert because he's the guy that's following a lot. Zen Ginger wants to know if you also like shuffleboard.
Ooh, I've never played shuffleboard successfully, and my guess of why is because my understanding is that for the most part, shuffleboard is a bar game. Am I correct about that?
No, I don't know. It's a lot of older folks play it. You always see it on cruises and stuff like that.
Sorry, I'm confusing like the tabletop shuffleboard version of it.
Got you. Like air hockey type stuff as opposed to the one with
but it's with sand. No, I've never played shuffleboard then. Never. I bet you it's a blast.
It's got some things in common with curling. I mean, there's some things there, but there's like it's almost like curling and darts had a baby. It's a little bit like that.
I'm sure that it is a lot of fun. The thing is, I'm not good at curling, so I don't think I would be good at shuffleboard either.
Gotcha. Let's see. We're back to Ryan. He says, did Alex ever use those mountains of Ceru and Oko stone he stored? It was funny to see giant piles of rock in his living space.
Yeah. I have not yet used any of it. I had a very ambitious plan, which I don't think I can really go into, but I had a very ambitious plan that involved or required getting substantial assets in the aquarium hobby for free, because I really wanted to start doing a lot more scapes. And that deal has stalled. So right now, my backyard is just filled with stone. I am rescaping this tank this week. I'm ripping it all out.
Yeah.
But I'm probably going to use the same stone that's in there, just totally different wood, which will transform the entire look of the scape. So yeah, I've got 400 pounds of stone that I'm not using.
And that tank you said is going away like within the next day or so, right?
Literally, I am going to break it down in the next 24 hours. Yeah.
Did you want to show us down there too?
Yeah.
Or
so
all the different stuff?
I'll walk through the whole process. I'm hopefully going to make a video about it. We'll see if I actually have the energy to do it. But there are a lot of fish in there. There's well north of 100 fish in there that I've got to get out. But I've also got to get all the plants out. So step one, and I will show you what I'm planning on doing. So stick around through my diatribe. But the fish, first I've got to get all the plants out. They've got to go in totes in water because it'll take me 3 or 4 days to set up the next scape. So I've got to keep them happy. Then I've got to get all the hardscape out, drain the tank. And then I probably won't have time to scape it again until Friday. So then I'll have to refill the tank. So there'll just be fish in the tank. And then I've got to catch all the fish to rescape the tank, put them in the tote that the plants will be in. I don't know how I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
And all of this has to be done because I am presenting at Guapa, which is my local aquarium club, the Greater Washington Aquatic Plant Association.
Nice.
And the talk that I'm giving on Saturday is about the process of rescaping a giant aquarium. And I can't give that talk unless the aquarium is rescaped.
Gotcha. So it's gotta happen.
I'm just very stressed about how in the world is any of that going to happen. But my plan is I am going to rescape the entire tank using cypress knees. So cypress knees, beautiful, native to the United States wood, which I like. And, as people cut them down for various reasons, you can often get a hold of the knees from the trees that have already been cut down. The problem is cypress knees are really, really, really buoyant. They are like a cork, and oftentimes they're hollow. It's really rare to see a scape with cypress. So we'll see how it goes. This is an experiment. It's a pricey experiment, but it should be a fun experiment. My biggest concern is that this is going to release something that's going to harm the fish. I was
going to ask that because we just had a conversation, I think yesterday, or it was just recently, and somebody did bring up cypress if it was okay for fish tanks. So
and I genuinely, I've seen it used a little bit, but I genuinely don't know. So I'm going to keep an eye on everything and see how it goes. Gotcha. Now, there's all this bark. The bark is going to flake off very quickly. It's going to be a process. This is going to be messy. And this dyes the water like nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm putting a lot of cypress in this tank. Okay. So it is going to be a thing. But if I show you,
it's going to be a blackwater tank at first, right?
Yeah. Well. So because it's buoyant, I have broken up a bunch of cheap tile from Home Depot and attached the wood, drilled through the bottom, used great pond stuff to secure everything together. And I'll show you. So I have this whole setup here.
Look at that.
All of this, all of these cypress knees. And then I've got all the plants that are going to go from this tank, plus some other different species that I want to work with, because I really want this to be a more crypt-focused tank, because, again, I haven't seen that many crypt-focused aquascapes recently, or really since YouTube has come around. Crypts have kind of been out of fashion in aquascaping for a decade or more. So I'm going to try to make something that's a mix of the Java fern and Anubias and the boost that I have, and then add a bunch of crypts into the mix. And we'll see what happens. Like, it's going to be an experiment.
Yeah.
Who knows what will happen?
What size is that tank again?
150 gallons plus a 40-gallon sump.
Gotcha.
So it's close to 200 gallons full.
Nice. And, we do have somebody in the fish fam, Chubbs, lives in Louisiana, who does, he's got a tank that is, I think it's entirely, he's got like 30 different crypts in there.
That's awesome.
It is a beautiful.
I've fallen in love with them. I think they're such a cool plant. They're tough to scape with in the traditional like aquascaping sense, because they're relatively slow growing, and they migrate on their own, and they don't like being messed around with. But this tank, it's 6 feet off the ground. I don't like messing with it. I generally do like one big trim a month, and it's at the point where I would need to cut everything back, and instead I'm just going to take it down. But I just will hang the siphon over and do water changes. But otherwise, I don't touch it at all because it's so high, and that's why I'm kind of drawn towards crypts of they can just kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah, not near as much. And Ginger Graves asks if you're working on anything you can talk about right now, and that's pretty much what is that your main project now? Obviously it is. You got to have it done by Saturday. So thanks again for hanging out with us.
It is my biggest main project right this second. I mean, I also have this orb tank right here, which I set up maybe 2 months ago. I'm still fighting hair algae in it. And I think that's because it's so close to a window and it's an orb, so it's gathering light
Gotcha.
and really funneling it and focusing it. But so I'm working on that. In terms of like aquariums, that's pretty much what I'm working on. And in the meantime, right now I don't really have the bandwidth, but I am slowly working on the film that I started in January of 2020, and wanted to have finished by the end of 2020. But as we all know, 2020 went poorly, and I was not able to go back to Brazil to finish filming. But I'm hoping to go back to Brazil sometime in the next 8 months or so to finish filming for that film. So that's like a second tier project that I'm slowly getting to.
Gotcha. I didn't see Alex from the Secret History Living in Your Aquarium, but Alex, if you are in here before the chat, Alex and I did talk about what you asked me to ask him, just so you're aware.
It's true. This
yes,
book
yes,
is proof that we had a conversation.
And Dee Dee just has some words of support for you. She says, please tell Alex that I thank him for sharing his personal life choices. People that think they have to hide their lives miss out on so much love. If someone loves you, they still do. So
That's
just
true.
some words of support.
I also, Ginger asked a question. I just want to acknowledge her and say, thanks so much. Ginger has been supporting Tank Tested. Every time I go to an event, she says hello, and it's lovely. So I just want
Ginger Graves.
Yeah,
she's a great person. She's definitely well loved in the fish fam. A part of the Tennessee Fish Mafia. We have this Tennessee Fish Mafia with a whole bunch of. It's surprising because Tennessee's not a really super populous state, but they're well represented in the fish fam. There's a whole bunch of them, and they're great people. A lot of fun. Chris Robertson says, "Isn't bonsai about the journey and not the result? I feel like aquascaping is more results oriented, more like 70-30 results to journey, where bonsai is 10-90. So,
yeah, I mean that's a good question, and they both struggle from the same problem, which is it's hard to show a finished work because bonsai are very heavy. Aquariums are even heavier. So the only way to really show off what you've done is in competitions. And bonsai, you go to a huge amount of work to put it on a bus or a truck and drive it to wherever the competition is. With aquascaping, you have to take a picture. And that process of documenting it does kind of ruin the journey to some degree. Because as soon as you are documenting it for a competition, it's about what the judges want rather than what you want or the journey that you've been on. Okay. So I do kind of agree with that process of there's a tough line to toe with enjoying the journey in aquascaping.
Yeah. I don't have the patience for the bonsai stuff. I obviously love trees. I got a couple of Norfolk Island pines. There's one out of view over here. It's a 6 foot tall one. I've had it for a long time.
Wow.
I got my pothos. There's a monstera behind me. There's plants everywhere. I do love my plants, but I just don't have the patience for for bonsai, especially at this part of my life. By the time I really get into one, I'll be gone.
Well, as bleak a thought as that is, I will make the sell that it is surprisingly easy to convert a normal tree into a bonsai tree.
Gotcha.
So you could always go into your backyard. I don't know if you have, a maple or something that's this big around and just cut off 90% of it down to just the stump. And it'll come back and then you can start beating it into submission. And then one day, 5 years from now, dig it up and put it in a pot and you've got a bonsai. So
that sounds exhausting. It just sounds exhausting.
Fair enough.
People, my friends here all know I always say it. I'm a lazy guy. And Dee Dee just had a suggestion for you. She said you could buy a second tote to keep the fish in until you finish the scape, so that you don't have to put them back in and stuff.
That is a really good point, and that's probably the right decision to do.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm torn about is how cool would it be to just have an empty tank? As someone that has giant full tanks all the time, to just see 150 fish swimming around by themselves, even for a day,
Yeah.
would be pretty cool. And I
Yeah.
kind of want to see that, but
Yeah.
that may be unrealistic.
Yeah, I get you though. That would be neat to just see, especially because I like heavily planted tanks too, and a lot of times the fish are hiding, but just when there's no place to hide.
Right.
Um,
I know that I still have Corridoras in that tank. Probably not as many as I put in there, but I know I do still have at least a dozen of them. I've never seen them.
yeah,
They disappeared. So it would be great to just be able to say, like, there you are.
yeah.
I can count you. I know how many of you there are.
Here's a real good one from Fish Room Fever, Alex. In contrast to the color grading, what area do you feel that you're best at, and what advice would you give someone trying to do better in that area? So we're back to the the color stuff with the videos.
I mean, it's tough because I have a very specific aesthetic of storytelling, which is what I do on Tank Tested, which is much slower, much more like just chill and relaxed. And that's not generally what my industry supports, because my industry is supported by commercials. And you can't just be really chill and calm and trust your audience to stick around. You've got to justify why they need to sit through 4 minutes of commercials to come back to the next thing. But I will say that the thing that I enjoy the most is the editing process. I've made my career on taking projects that are a hot mess in terms of the footage not being what it needs to be, and finding a way to tell a story using the footage that's there. So in terms of advice for the editing world, I think that rather than focus on what you don't have, try to figure out what the story is that wants to be told. And I think that's true of photography. I think that's true of almost anything. You can always try to jam something to be what you originally envisioned it being. But you're better off like letting the thing kind of tell you what it wants to be, and then trying to polish that and making it the most perfect version of what it wants to be, rather than trying to exert your will on it.
Very cool. That's like whittling.
Yeah.
You find a piece of wood and you don't know what's in there, and then you start carving it, and then you see stuff start to come out, and
it's exactly that.
Nice.
It's having an incredible amount of control, but it's also allowing the inanimate thing to have some control back.
Gotcha. Very cool. That's a great answer. I love that. This has been very informative so far. And again, we're almost 8 o'clock. How are you doing on time? I don't want to take up your whole night. Okay.
I'm fine.
I just sometimes these things go for 2 or 3 hours, so I didn't want to
No, I am happy to sit around as long as the answers that I'm giving are interesting enough for someone to listen.
Oh yeah, they've been great. It's been a blast so far, and I'm loving it. It just jumped on me. Hold on a second. I got to find it again. Here we go. Real Madrid fan says, was Alex a teacher in his previous life? He's really good at explaining any topic. And you said no. Have you ever done any type of teaching like that? Any type of talks?
Right. And my job is to teach people about the world. Right. That is at its core what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where my background is. I think the closest that I've come is I did a digital series for National Geographic Education called Modern Explorer. That was 9 episodes long. That was kind of trying to reframe what it is to be a scientist and what exploration looks like. That it's not necessarily swashbuckling, but it's more about the understanding the world around us. But yeah, that's all it comes down to is, as long as you love the process of learning and discovering something and looking at something and trying to find the I don't understand that thing. Why is that the way that is?
Yeah.
You can take anyone on a journey of understanding why that thing is the way that it is, because
Yeah.
once you point out a weird phenomenon, people want the answer. They may not notice that there's something weird happening, but as soon as you point it out, they're like, huh, why is that happening?
Yeah. And and once you teach somebody else about it, your understanding of it is deeper each time as well, right?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. The example that always comes to mind for me, which I never got to do, I worked on a show, or I produced a show called Wildlife with Bertie Gregory, and the whole season was set on Vancouver Island in Vancouver, which, well, it's obviously in Vancouver. It's Vancouver Island in British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada, and there are a huge population of bears there, and they're entirely supported by the incredible influx of salmon that come in. That's why their populations are able to grow to the size that they are. But in a little bit of the footage, one of the bears had mange on its back. And I was so fascinated by, like, why does that bear's fur look matted? And what is happening there? And I wanted to just do a whole episode on mange, which, like, not a topic that would have been acceptable. But, like, to me, that's the type of thing of, like, well, I want to know what's going on there. And I think that's, so to pat myself on the back, all it takes to be a good teacher, I think, is to be curious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in being able to present your ideas in a way that doesn't just put people to sleep too. I mean, it's a big part of it. It's a huge part of it. There's some people out there that are so knowledgeable, but you watch their talks or something, and it's hard to absorb the information because they just don't present it well. And
yes, it is the
talent too.
To present a topic, what you should do is you should first present a mystery that can be solved by your topic, and then answer that mystery. Gotcha. And I think that's where, like, a lot of teaching fails. If rather than, for instance, teaching math, rather than teaching, like, how cosines work, you should teach a real life scenario, like, I want to do this thing, how do I do it? And now you've introduced a problem that the audience, students, want to solve, and you can come along on the journey of figuring out, oh, well, the solution is to understand how cosines and sines work and how they interact. And that's a better way of getting people to come along than just teaching what a cosine and sine is. So it's about introducing a mystery, knowing that that's a mystery that you can solve.
Love it. That's awesome. This is the second part of that question. Have you ever had a breaking point that made you want to quit the hobby temporarily? Or even permanently? I mean, you obviously haven't quit, but was there anything that really stood out that just made you want to, I'm done, I'm out. Have you ever come across anything like that?
I've definitely felt that way about doing YouTube videos. And the reason I felt that way about doing YouTube videos is because every video I make is at least 40 hours of my life. And, like, that's a lot. And when a video does terribly, like the most recent video I posted, it's like, what did I do this for? Like, the whole point was to reach an audience, and if no one cares, I could be doing other things with my time.
Sure.
In terms of the aquarium hobby, and I think that we all have experienced this probably many times, at some point, the work to keep everything looking good eclipses the amount of enjoyment you get out of it. And that's why you have people explode into, what we call multi-tank syndrome, get all these tanks, and then they crash down and they either get out of the hobby or they cut down to one tank. And if they stay with the one tank, over time it grows back up, and then you reach a breaking point where you're like, I no longer enjoy this. This is a chore that I've created for myself. And then you break it back down. So I've definitely had those moments where I was just like, this is more than I can manage and have every tank look as good as I want it to look. And I'm not spending time with friends or family or getting what I need to get done. But I've never gotten to the point of wanting to quit this hobby, because at the end of the day, like, nothing to me is cooler than freshwater ecosystems. They are the bee's knees, and they're probably like the least celebrated ecosystem on our planet.
I'm with you as far as loving them, definitely. Um, Alex says, Alec, I do that all the time, Alec, and I'm so sorry. I always say your name wrong. Thank Alex for his wonderful videos. And Barr, Barr, also does bonsai. Do you know who
Yeah,
Barr is?
Tom Barr. Tom
Oh,
Barr does
okay.
bonsai. Yeah, I mean,
His
I
name
don't
didn't stick
know
out.
Tom really at all. We are friends on Facebook. I respect him a lot. And I've been very envious of his incredible collection of bonsai, which I, I will advocate again is not that much work because you only do stuff to them like every 3 or 4 months. The rest of the time, you're just watering them. And you can get an automatic watering system if you want. So Tom has, gosh, it's got to be hundreds of bonsai in his backyard that he curates and then sells. It is a business. But, you know, it's cool. So, yes, I do know that Tom does that. I would love to one day visit his backyard and get to see everything and honestly get to see where he collects all the materials that he, sells into this hobby because he has an eye for it. He's really incredible.
So if anybody out there knows Mr. Barr, let him know. Let him know that Alex is looking to come over and hang out for a while.
Yeah. I'd have to get out to
um,
California, but yes.
let's see. You know what? I'm actually not seeing any other questions. I think we got them all.
Cool.
We're right about 8 o'clock. If anybody, we'll give it just a couple more minutes here because it is there's a delay. We'll give it a couple minutes here just to make sure that and thank you to the mods so much. You guys are awesome. Absolutely love you guys. You're the backbone of the Fish Fam. I've said it a million times. Thank you for dropping all the links. You guys just do an amazing job, and I appreciate the hell out of you. Um,
Well,
let's see.
I'll ask you a question
Sure.
because, and forgive me for not knowing this. It shows my lack of knowledge about your fish room. But
I yeah.
what do you currently have that you are really excited about? What is the fish that you're just
Well,
excited?
I mean, there's quite a few, but the right now this tank above my head right here, which you barely can see, it's just a little 29 gallon. It's barely started. I just barely started putting it together, and I'm not an aquascaper by any means, not by any means. I just throw stuff in the tank, and there we go. It looks good, and I love. I have a little 5 gallon right here by me. It's a shrimp tank that it's just it was so filled with plants that the shrimp probably even had trouble getting around. I love the overgrown look. I don't trim them
Yeah.
hardly. I love it. But anyways, this tank has pseudomcgills in it, and I'm really on a pseudomcgill kick right now. I'm trying to get 5 or 6 different strains of those.
I don't know what
Um,
those are. Tell me what those are.
so they were called blue-eyed rainbows.
Okay.
They're the little ones. I
So
have rainbow fish as well.
there are species of rainbow fish.
They're not really. They were. Well, see, that's up in the air. But Gary Lang, who is
Yeah, I'm
rainbow
familiar.
specialist, he said no. He said they are not, that they've just recently discovered that they're actually not rainbows. But a lot of people still do call them blue-eyed rainbows. So they're actually they're like barely related to them, or they're related, but they're not rainbow fish.
Gotcha.
So, but still, a lot of people, that's how they're sold. Um, there's a like, I don't know, 15 different types, and they're all, they all sort of look alike, but they have different colors. They have different, so they have their pectoral fins. A lot of times they have these, almost looks like they're wearing like jazz hands or something, or it's got like the
Yeah.
Michael Jackson gloves, or they're just the very ends of them are very, very bright. And uh, let's see, Xanadude, he has signifiers, pseudomcgill signifiers, and he said they always look like little X-wings when they flare, and they look amazing when they flare. They're little fish, but when they flare, they just get so tall and all this,
Yeah.
there's like I
Are,
love
do they spar with each other, or like are they active, really engaging community fish as
yeah,
well?
they do. They're not like crazy. They're definitely not like very aggressive. Like I've got 3 different kinds in that tank right now, which is a no-no for purists. You don't,
Yeah.
because they will crossbreed.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sell them. If they happen to crossbreed, I'm not doing anything to breed them right now. So if it happens, they will move into another tank on their own, and that's it.
So,
I like having the different ones in there. I like looking at the differences between the different kinds. I plan to put 5 different types in that tank because again, they get to be about 1.5 to 2 inches long.
Cool.
They're not very big. So that's the
Well,
one I'm most excited about.
Well, to wrap things up, as if anyone has any questions, would you like to see? I can give you a little tour of the stuff that's in
Yes.
my house.
Let's do it.
Is that breaking the format?
There is no format.
All right.
The only format is we talk. That's our
All
format.
right. Let's see if I
Wouldn't
can
that be
turn
awesome?
my camera around. I don't think. Let's see. I want to actually use my nice camera, so bear with me.
And while you're doing that, we did have a question. Are you into superheroes? Do you have a favorite superhero? Have you ever been into those?
Gosh, I haven't really. I don't really get superheroes. So, and I'll answer. I mean, do I have a superhero favorite?
That is beautiful.
I don't know that I do, honestly. I wish I could say that I did. I liked the visual style of Doctor Strange a few years ago.
Yeah.
But no, I don't really engage with the superhero world, honestly. So this tank, it's a nice little pretty orb. It's got a lot of hair algae. It's got a lot of stuff going on.
I like it.
There's a couple of Amano shrimp, and there's one betta lurking somewhere in there. And it's a 10-gallon bowl. So literally 10 gallons of water in an orb, which I really like. Then going along here, I've got my BioOrb from Elasi, which I've never made a video about. I probably should at some point because this tank has been set up since the start of quarantine, and it's time. It's time to start again.
Yeah, and I'm interested in those anyways. I just think they're such a cool
design
and stuff, and
they're beautiful. They're really cool, and I mean, it's a different world, and I'm not very good at terrestrial plants. Outside of like really show things like the bonsais where I know I have to pay attention to them. I made a mess. But with this, because it takes care of itself, it's a lot easier for me to deal with.
Yeah, love the ferns too.
You can see back here, I've got all of my very, very sad pothos and, gosh, the name of this genus is now escaping me. If anyone knows what that is, let me know in the chat. It looks like pothos, but this is so dehydrated. I just watered it this evening. But meanwhile, this tank is having a grand old time. You can see
now you said you think that is at the point where you would trim it normally.
Oh, I mean, it's beyond the point that I can trim it. I mean, you can see up here, I've got all of my tiger lotus that have reached the surface. They're blocking out all of the light. All of my stems have taken over. They're shading out my Java fern and Nubius. Here, I've got just like it's reached the surface. It's so overgrown.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. To me, that is just amazing. Oh, yeah. Thank you. People in the chat are saying, hey, why is he not full screen? I just totally forgot. I was so enamored with the tank that I forgot. There we go.
There we go. All right. I'm going to turn, you're going to get a wide view of my everything. Because I'm going to turn off the light that I was using to film myself so that I don't have glare. And I moved these lights. These are the UNS Titan ones. I moved them off of what I propped them on so that I wouldn't get glare in the shot. But you can see I've got now 2 mini rainbow cribs lurking in this tank because this male in particular has been mating up a storm, and now I have way more adults than I did when I started this tank a year and a half ago. You can see juveniles just everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And I do not want them here. I want them out. And that is a part of the process of I need to get them out of the tank, and then I need to find a new home for them.
Yeah, I love
that will not be with me. Will be with someone else, hopefully, if I can find them. So if you live in the DMV and you want just like a bucket of rainbow cribs, let me know.
Awesome. There you go, people.
Yeah. But yeah,
real quick question here for you, Alex. Stephen P says it looks lovely. No CO2.
So I do have CO2. Let's see if my CO2 canister is filled right now.
Even
my
the
CO
back
canister
of that tank
is empty. So no, right now there is no CO2 in this tank. You can see it's frosted glass. It's really pretty from
Yeah,
behind, honestly.
I like that.
But right now there is no CO2, which I should have, been aware of because nothing is purling. But I would say this tank is maybe half the time has CO2 and half the time doesn't. It doesn't need CO2. You can see like everything is getting a little bit leggy, and you can see some blackening on the Java fern, which is probably a combination of a lack of CO2 and a little bit of malnutrition on my
And
part.
it still looks better than all my Java ferns.
But yes, this tank is totally fine without CO2. Everything grows perfect without CO2. But yeah, you can see, I mean, there's some spot algae on that Anubias, which wouldn't be there if there was CO2 in the tank. I'm pretty confident about that. But it's doing fine. There's a little bit of blackbeard algae in there, which is kind of inevitable, but I'm going to have to deal with and try to get rid of as much as I can because I don't want that to be my future.
And what was that right next to the hair algae? Was that the bulbitis or what was that?
Yeah, so this is bulbitis here.
Yeah. Okay.
Then I've got just a bunch of Nana Petite.
Yeah, beautiful too. Love
Anubias,
that.
but you can see the Anubias. There's blackbeard algae on the Anubias roots. So got to solve for that. Don't love that being a part of this tank. You can also see how much mulm has built up at the bottom of the tank.
Yeah.
Which I don't really have a problem with. It's fine. It's not aesthetically pleasing.
Sure.
But it's not really harming that much because this is such a large water volume.
Yeah.
It's not really having a problem. And this is also where all of the rainbow cribs breed, in this little cave back here. So it's a pain to deal with it. But yeah, gosh, there are so many now. This is a problem.
Look at them all.
There are so many.
Real quick. Scott from King and Queen Cichlids came in and says, hi to everybody. And he said, hi to you specifically. He said, I met Alex several times. Such a great person.
Hi, Scott. Yeah. I mean, I know, Scott, you've recently downsized, but if you want my rainbow cribs, you're welcome to them. I'm just trying to pawn them off on anyone. I know that Scott lives about 3 hours away from me.
Gotcha. And another real quick question. Stephen would like to know, how long did it take for that level of mulm to build?
That's probably, realistically, that's probably close to 4 months.
Wow.
And the reason why is, as I mentioned, this is 6 feet off the ground. Like this is at my eye height.
Yeah.
I'm 6'4", so I can just see over the top of this tank.
Gotcha.
My view is about that. And dealing with a 2-foot deep tank and siphoning all of that stuff out without disturbing everything is a pain. It's doable, but I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
And because it's not causing negative impacts on everything else, as long as I do regular water changes, because I do about a 50% water change every week and a half to 2 weeks. Okay. I siphon out what I can, but I don't worry about it too much, honestly.
Yeah.
And then, you can see how overgrown this is because you should be able to see all the way down the tank and you can't really.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite views is getting to see all of the fish swimming up and down this 5-foot long channel. But they're getting pushed closer and closer to the edge of the glass because there's not that much swimming room anymore.
It's, what though? It's just amazing to me. It looks beautiful and I absolutely love it. That's what my tanks aspire to be, anywhere close to that.
Show you from above. I don't know if we can
look at that.
Really see anything. I would take you underwater because the phone can do that, but we'll lose Wi-Fi. So I can't truly take you underwater during a live stream. But as we go over here, I wanted to
actually, if you don't mind, before and you don't have to, you can stay right where you're at. That's fine. Just had a couple of quick questions. Tallahassee Ned would like to know what kind of substrate you have in that one.
Yeah. So there's a mix of things. One is right down here. This is just pool filter sand, And you can get a fancier sand, but pool filter sand, white pool filter sand is so cheap.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about covering a 150-gallon tank, cheap is nice. And then what you can see with the aqua soil, which when I do the next scape, I've got to come up with a better plan of how to separate everything. The aqua soil is UNS contra soil. And it's done lovely for me. It's been in there 1.5 years, so it is surely spent. And the age of this tank is also probably a contributing factor of why there's blackbeard algae now showing up, because there hasn't been blackbeard algae until the last month or two. Gotcha. And I think it just has to do with the fact that this ecosystem needs an influx of things that can't really be provided unless I start really heavily root tabbing. And I would rather just start over, because I've done what I needed to do with this tank. I'm ready to do something else.
Is that a common thing for you too, is to leave up a tank maybe for a year or so, and then a 1.5 years, and then move along? Is that?
I think that's probably a reasonable amount of time. Yeah. I think, because at the end of the day, what you can do with this, like all this Java fern has grown and it's beautiful and I really love it. What am I going to do? I'm going to rip it. Like, there's not that many places that I can plant different things. There's not many different things I can do. And I plan on keeping all the fish except for these guys. So they'll just move into a new home. And gosh, I'm seeing so many. There's another little juvenile.
Look at him. And real quick about this tank as well. Kelly Foreman would like to know, how do you feel about having a tank that tall? You said you did like it. Are you any regrets? Would you do that again?
No, I have no regrets about it. I will feed them while I'm here. No,
Scott, thank you.
I don't have any regrets. So as I mentioned just a second ago, I'm 6'4". One of the things that I hate about aquariums is having to peer down into them. I'll show you another tank in a second of a tank that I have to peer down into. And I don't like that. I don't enjoy having to peer into an aquarium. I like being able to walk into the room and see this. Yeah. I mean, it'd be even cooler if I could build something to frame everything up. But honestly, like, it works as a nice room divider as is. So yeah, I mean, no regrets. There are obviously pitfalls, but there are pitfalls of having a low tank as well. So, you know, it all balances out, and I enjoy it. This is why you guys are mating so much. I'm feeding you too much.
And what's that stand to? Hold on, I think there was another question. Scott, thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate it. And back at you, man. Myrtle had a comment. Let's see. There we go. How is that tall tank supported? So is the stand? It must be metal, right?
So I'm bringing it all out. So the tank was created by Custom Aquariums. They do not pay me to say this. I love this tank. It's such a beautiful tank. The stand is also by Custom Aquariums. So it's 1.5 inch steel, 6 pillars of it. Wow. And I had them build that whole space out because I didn't want it to fully block my eye line, because I thought that would be too imposing. So I have an old Build My LED light on the bottom of the tank that's lighting my really, really malwatered terrestrial plants.
Yeah.
And then underneath that is the sump. But like, as a result, it blocks. It's a room divider, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. Now it is still, it's a colossal tank.
Yeah.
It's very heavy. But it doesn't hopefully feel that heavy.
Yeah. Gotcha. I get what you're saying. And here's a good one from Scott. He said, let me put Alex on the spot. Rachel is a great friend of Alex. Have they gone head to head in an aquascape contest? And if so, who has the winning record between the two of you?
I don't think we've ever even entertained that idea. You know, for a while, Rachel had a lot of tanks that she was trying to have scaped, and I was like on the roster to hopefully scape one of those tanks. But we live just far enough away that we never really organized that. Yeah. And I think whatever tank that I was going to scape ended up getting scaped by someone else, which no hard feelings there. But I don't know. Rachel's not really a scaper. Rachel is a much better fish keeper than I am. And she does beautiful scapes, and I love how naturalistic her scapes feel.
Yeah.
So it would be fun to go head to head with her. But if I'm honest, I haven't seen her since the start of 2020 for obvious reasons. So at some point, I just want to hang out with her again.
Well, Scott, I know Keystone Clash next year. I don't know. I don't think you're as involved with it as you used to be, but that would be a good place to maybe put something like that on that would drag a bunch of people in to see it.
Yeah.
And I will be there, so I'm being selfish and bringing that up.
Oh, look! I mentioned that there are still quarries in here.
Yep.
See, and there was a second one before I walked up. They exist. They are just very against being seen.
Maybe there's a ton of them in there. Just
I mean, there is a huge island here. That there's 3/4 of the tank is not accessible to my eye line, so there could be lots of stuff in there. Every once in a while, I see, a half dozen or so poking around together. Yeah, so I'm happy to come back to this tank if anyone has any specific questions about it. I'm going to move on and show you a little bit else in here. Okay. So this tank, when we talk about low-tech tanks, so this tank is a 10-gallon tank, and it is a low-tech tank. You can see, wow, gosh, I did not clean this glass, but so there's a little bit of spot algae on the glass, which makes it not as visually pleasing as I want it to be. But you can see I've grown, and I will say at one point there was CO2. Okay. So I was running the smallest amount of CO2, about a bubble every 3 seconds off of this canister, this little, what is it, paintball canister. And that little canister lasted me about 8 months in this tank.
And that's Monte Carlo on the bottom?
Yeah, this is Monte Carlo.
Look at it.
Got S repens.
Look at it. Oh my.
And my favorite plant, which is this plant, which is what we call guapa grass. It is just a form of hair grass that was collected by a local member of Guapa. I love it. It's fully grown in. And then pearlweed. And then there's a beautiful crip as well. And all of that, and then the stone itself is petrified wood. But this tank is basically just in stasis. That is my tip or trick with CO2 is with especially Monte Carlo, you can get it to carpet, and you can see how thick this carpet of Monte Carlo is now. Yeah, you can get it to carpet, and then you can, with not a lot of CO2, you can get it to carpet. And then you can remove that CO2 and it will stay very happy and keep going. The biggest push for the CO2, in my experience, I don't have any science backing to back this up, is that it needs the CO2 the most to put in the root system. Okay. To get the root system going. You're really going to struggle to get that robust root system without CO2. But once it's carpeted, it'll stay like that for a long time. I mean, wow. S. repens is also like, look at how beautiful that is. That hasn't had CO2 in 4 or 5 months. It looks great. Like there's no holes. There's nothing.
And what else? Is that just a mono shrimp in there? What?
Yeah. So I believe there is one Amano shrimp, but there's also some cherry shrimp.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So these are all, now. Yeah, these are all cherry shrimp, and then they've fled, but you can see one briefly, maybe you can see there's about 8 Ember tetras.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because they're a really tiny tetra.
Beautiful.
But this tank is chilling, doing nothing stressful at all. It just runs. And that may be because I have been doing this for more than a decade. I recognize when things are going wrong and can correct for them. Yeah. But I think that people get scared about something being more complicated than it actually is. Plants want to survive. And also, we didn't talk about this, but my 2 cents is always, don't try to make a plant work if it doesn't want to work with you. use plants that are happy where you are.
Makes sense.
And with the lighting that you can provide. Don't fight something forever because you're going to lose and it's going to make you miserable.
But having agreed with what you just said, I would love that Monte Carlo. I've never had a tank with a really nice carpet like that. I've never done CO2, and I just absolutely love that. That is so beautiful.
Well, I mean, you can see I have none of this is cheap, but it's as cheap as you can get within this hobby. This is a pendant light from Fluval. It's their like Planted Plus pendant light. It's like $70-$80 on Amazon, which is not cheap, but it's also not a $500-$600 light. This is like the smallest canister filter. It's what a Phoenix something hang on back canister filter. You can see it's pumping out water just fine. And then I've got a substrate of, I think in here, it's Fluval Stratum. And this was maybe 2 cups of Monte Carlo. Granted, this tank has been set up for 10 or 11 months now.
Gotcha.
So this took its time, but you know, like it's beautiful. And it's going to be a shame for me to rip it up at some point.
Yes. Few comments from the chat. Scott said that is a great idea, maybe for Keystone Clash. So, you know, maybe think about that for next year there. Ricky said he's definitely going to that as well next year. Myrtle wants to know what species of hairgrass in the left back. You said that was the guapa. What was it? Guapa?
Yeah, it's guapa grass, and I'll show you.
Grass.
So I've got.
Is there any way to get that for us peons out here?
Yeah, I mean, I am one of the only people I think in the world that has it actually.
Wow.
Because it was locally collected and people kind of tear it out at some point and then don't hand it off to someone else. So I don't know how many other people in the world even have it, if I'm honest. It may be several, but it's not a unique species. It's just a unique form. But this is it. You know, it grows to be about 1 foot long. This is a little holding tank of various plants that mainly crypts, as I mentioned, that are going to go into 150. Even this, it's a nice little crypt. Don't ask me to tell you the species. I don't remember. I'll have to look it up. Yeah, I would love to hand this off to people just because I want it to exist outside of just me.
Yeah.
But I have not figured out a good way to do that yet. But it is a common form of Monte Carlo or of hair grass. The differentiator is that most long hair grasses produce seed pods, which have a specific scientific name, and I do not recall what that name is. This particular hair grass never goes to seed. It never flowers. You can see it's coming up above the surface. I was hoping to see if I could get any flowering, anything to happen. Haven't gotten anything. And as a result, it's just really, really beautiful without any distracting little nodes. And it absolutely will grow in low CO2, or no CO2 rather. And it grows like a weed. So yeah, I love it. I wish that I could, you know, hand it out to everyone. But it was collected in a elementary school like parking lot by one of the members of Guapa like 10 years ago, I would say. And he's since been back and, you know, he collected a small portion of it and it's gone. The ecosystem shifted, drainage changed. It's not there anymore. So, you know, it is a wild variety that just happens to spread exclusively through runners.
Yeah. Scott would like to know if it's a CARES plant, if you know.
I don't think so. Just because it's not. I don't think it's. We've been trying to get it ID'd and have it have a scientific name, and I think that we have an answer, and I believe it is a quite common species of hairgrass, so it's not at risk of anything. It's just a matter of this particular variety. Just like, you know, varieties of trees. Every once in a while, you get a variety that does something weird. This one doesn't produce seeds. It only runs through runners. I've had it personally for 5 years, and I've never seen it do anything but reproduce through runners.
You got a lot of people that want it. A lot of people are.
I believe it. It is my favorite plant for a reason. And I
Uh,
guess it's also my special sauce. No one else has this, so it's
Gotcha.
my differentiator. But that's not to say
Gotcha.
that I don't want to share it with people. I just am lazy and don't know how to go about it.
Gotcha. Well, you do have Jeremy says he's local and he wants some guapa grass, and
Okay.
then also Alishon said, "Does Alex know Gavin and Sheila? They have attended
Yes,
guapa
of
meetings in the
course.
past."
Of
Yeah.
course. I love both of them. They're wonderful.
Oh, gotcha. It was kind of a joke. Scott said about the Cares plant.
Yes. I mean, specifically cares are fish,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that doesn't mean that we shouldn't expand it out to plants. There are at-risk plants just as there are at-risk fish. Yeah.
Whole bunch of people are dying for it.
Yeah. I will now show you my less glamorous tanks. So, I've got this cube, same exact light. You can see I've got, what is this? This is Ludwigia repens, I believe. And you see it's flowering. It's very pretty.
Yeah.
But it's completely shaded out. Looks like a little bit of something else has made its way up to the surface. But it's completely shaded out what's going on below. There's literally no animal life in this tank. But I find it fascinating. I apologize. Let me see if I can clear my lens a little bit. But I love this weird jungle root system. And there's some really low light plants. There's some needle leaf Java fern and some anubias having a grand old time in here. And that's it. And I've not really figured out what to do with this tank. I'm probably going to break it down. But it's a weird little thing that's been running for 18 months, and I've never really figured out what to do with it.
You need to put an X-wing fighter in there because it does look like Dagobah.
Oh yeah, if I did that, maybe I could get a bunch of views on YouTube.
Yeah, there you go.
Because this alone, I don't think this is the thumbnail that's going to motivate a whole bunch of people.
I just love it, though. I absolutely love it. That's my style right there.
I mean, yeah, the thing that, and you can see all the mold that's built up. Also, the substrate is all fossilized shark teeth. Just because. But
wow.
I could maybe put a pair of Dario in here. I love Dario. I think they're one of the best fish. And they would be really happy, poking around, and I'd have to add something for them to hunt in this system. But they would have a blast in here. But it's a 9.5 gallon tank. It's just not that big, and when there's that much biomass in there, there's really not a lot of room for anything. Maybe I could put shrimp in there. It's stable enough that I could probably put a load of shrimp in there, but there's not enough light. Now that I'm just thinking out loud. There's not enough light to really grow the biofilm that they would be really happy eating. So yeah, I'd have to really dose it.
It's still very cool.
You can see I just brought in my 2 ficus bonsai. You can see how narrow both of them are.
Yeah.
Because it's now getting just below the temperature that they're comfortable with. And you can see this plant I just cut off the top of it, but it needs a lot more weight on this side. There's a lot that has to happen. But I've had this bonsai for 5 years, something like that. But I mainly kept it inside. And it wasn't until this year that I was like, I should put it outside. And it just has been having a grand old time. This one, same thing, just terrible wiring. This is why I would not show this off. Terrible wiring, but slowly building a form. And then if we go over here, so this is a real jungle tank, and you can't really see because everything is so glaring. But this is a real jungle tank, and this is just a tank that I keep my blue shrimp in. Let's see if I can see any of them. I should have fed them before coming over here. There's probably 300 or 400 blue shrimp in here, but good luck
Neos
finding
or
any of them.
Neos?
Yeah, they're Neocardinia.
Yeah.
But as I said, who knows if you could find any of them? I'm looking, so apologies for the terrible view. I've noticed that the population has been decreasing recently, and I think it has to do with the weather shifting, because otherwise it's been a pretty stable tank. I literally don't see any in here, but there are many hundreds of them.
My blues, I always have trouble finding as well, but my cherry shrimp are just always out and about. Oh, there we go.
You can see a couple of them.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 there.
Yeah, so they're having a good old time in there. But yeah, there's guapa grass in here. There's like 6 or 7 species of plants that are, emergent growth because I'm just totally out of control. And you see this is a really old marine land light, I think. It's not really bright enough to do anything, but I leave it on. Literally, it is the night light in this room. This is the only light that I leave on 24/7.
Yeah.
And it's enough light that it does its whole thing. It's got a filter back there. It's got a little heater. Call it a day. I have one more tank that I will show you. And then I will let everyone go if there is still anyone watching.
Oh yeah, he's still 77 people watching.
Wow.
Everybody's enraptured by this. This is our thing, man. This is what we do.
Yeah. So you can see I've got some spot algae growing on the glass here, but this is my biotope tank, which is the leaves have started to really break down. I've got to replenish it, but this is what I've been using to capture up close photographs of cardinal tetras because, as I mentioned, I'm working on a film about the fisheries in the Rio Negro, and these fish are kind of the star of the show. And that means I actually need beauty shots of them. I need video of them being beautiful. Yeah. And the best way to do that in the natural history world is to do what we call set work. And set work is where you create the ecosystem that the animal lives in, kind of try to recreate it the best you can. And if you imagine that there was a cardinal tetra right here, there's not, but you've got a little bit of the wood, a little bit of the rock, a little bit of leaf litter, that kind of thing. And if you cut that in between a wide shot of the river, every person that's watching that film is going to believe that that's happening in real life. And that's kind of the secret of natural history is if you're talking about an animal that's smaller than, I don't know, a mouse is pretty much the line. To get that to be on camera, it's in a set. It's all reproducing natural behavior by recreating the natural habitat. So this tank kind of does the best that I can of recreating what I saw when I visited the Rio Negro about 2 years ago. And these fish are happy doing their thing in there. And this is a 40-gallon tank, which maybe there's 10 gallons of water in because there's so much material and I've only filled it halfway because they don't live in 1.5 feet deep water. They often live in 8 inches or 6 inches of water.
That is an amazing piece of wood right there in the middle too.
Yes. I have my lovely collection of random pieces of wood that are they look so beautiful.
Yeah.
And one day I'll do a really beautiful microscape because if you didn't have a sense of scale, if I told you that was a 3-foot log, you'd probably believe it.
Yeah. I love I go collecting on the shore all the time on Lake Ontario and look for different woods and stuff. And I've pulled some pretty cool ones out of it. That stuff has been in that water for so long, and it's just it's soft. All the corners are just rounded, and they just look amazing. We actually had a question about that giant hairgrass. Steph said sand spike rush, Alocrius montevidi. Let's look at those names. She thought maybe that would be what it is, but then Myrtle said
it's a pretty common grass. Like I believe that there are variants of it available in the hobby. It's just that particular one is not. So now I'm full screen. Unless you want to see other things, do you want to bring us back so that we're the two of us together?
Is there anything else that you would like to show us, or we cover most of it?
I mean, I'm not gonna take you into my bedroom where I've got a bunch of little teeny things going on. So that's pretty much what I got, and I can't show you bonsai because it's very dark outside.
Yeah. Well, this is probably a good time to cut her off. We do have a few people that go do their streams at 9 o'clock tonight, so that'll give people time to go to the restroom and get another
Of
drink and
course.
all that before the other ones. Alex, I cannot say thank you enough. This has been a great stream. Very informative, just fun. I just absolutely loved it. Um, maybe we can have you back in 6 months or a year. And
I would love to.
and
We
I
can,
love that idea of the Keystone Clash aquascape
I do
between you
too.
and Rachel.
I do
Maybe
too.
maybe
I think it'd be a lot of fun. So I am game.
there we go.
But
Scott,
yeah,
make it happen.
absolutely. I'm happy to come back once this tank is rescaped, and
Yeah.
we can talk about that. We can talk about whatever. So
Now, are you doing video on that tank too, the teardown and everything?
I mean, yes,
Okay.
I need to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say, like, however hard you think doing maintenance on a 150-gallon tank is, making sure that you captured what you're filming, like as you're doing it,
Yeah.
it is really, really daunting.
Yeah.
So I may set up a wide shot and break it down. Maybe I'll set up 2 cameras and cut back and forth between them. It won't be a particularly exciting process.
Well, I'd like to see it, but I guess even just seeing the final, that
Yes,
will be
absolutely. That will happen eventually. I have, fingers crossed, hopefully a more professional film shoot that's coming to film the tank sometime in a month or so for a separate project. And I would love to have it be pretty by then. So that's kind of my other goal is by like Thanksgiving, I really want this tank to be at its peak again, and
Gotcha.
we'll see if I can make that happen.
Well, we'll really look forward to seeing what you do with it. And hey, everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. We did 2 hours again. I just, I'm so lucky to have all these amazing guests come up and just give us these educational and informative talks. I can't say thank you enough. Next week we get Rack from Bird Garden. He's going to come up and talk to us. And Rack's done a lot of stuff with fish as well. So it's not just birds. If you're not a bird fan, he does have a lot of experience with different fish and stuff too. So that'll be another good one. And hey, thanks so much, Alex, for being here.
Of course,
Again,
this was a pleasure.
Everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. And go watch, Ladies Night with Shanna. I see that the links were dropped, or Bentley Pasco. There's a lot of great streams still coming. So go hit somebody up, spread that fish fam love, and we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, and thank you so much for building this community. It's wonderful.
They are an amazing group. They really are. They really are.